Hey Whappers, welcome into this week's ATW Around the World, and our topic is one that may come as a surprise, mainly because this is a topic that often is associated with AP US history, not AP World history. But over the years, I've seen a recent trend developing in which Native American societies in North America, especially in North America, feature prominently on the AP World history exam. And that's an important aspect that I really want to tap into today, while also covering a little bit about the Mayan civilization, which I was going to plan to do that as one of the topics over the break, but we're kind of killing two birds with one stone here. So, and just keep in mind, this is all quizable information. Now, I'm trying out the earbuds. I had a feeling that this may help with some of the audio quality. We'll see how it plays out. But not much else is going to be different other than you're preparing for a quiz tomorrow. So knowing that, take good notes. Not everything that I say will be on the quiz, but you can use your notes on the quiz. And so let's get to it. We finished in class today discussing Oceania, the region in which many natives migrated off of islands in the South Pacific to colonize places like Australia and New Zealand and Fiji and Hawaii eventually as well. And these native groups, one of the biggest differences between their culture and the culture of North American native tribes was the water. Most of our Oceania tribes, we talked about how important the water was in terms of the culture. You know, being on the ocean led to the development of certain technologies and certain, obviously, migration patterns and certain crops and the weather, etc. The environment played a large role in their way of life. That is a central theme I want you to sort of focus on, that more so than anything else with early Native American tribes in North America. And when I say early Native American tribes, I'm basically referring to the idea of who was there before the Europeans arrived. And that will be a kind of a post-fall break topic for us. Excuse me. So early Native American tribes in North America were so tied to the environment. It was the dominant way of life, dominant factor in establishing a way of life. Let me give an example. Tribes that lived here in the American Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico, parts of Texas, the warm climate allowed for them to bake dense bricks of mud, which they went on to use as the bricks that they would use to build their homes. You know, this was the adobe style of house construction, which is a quite common style that still is in existence, and maybe some of your houses mimic this style of adobe building. And tribes like the Anasazi, for example, who you may recall from last year's 7th grade class, the Anasazi were famous for building homes right into the mountains and into the hills here and caves of Native American Southwest. So, you know, that's just one small example. I'm going to kind of fill you guys in on a number of them. And so whenever you see questions on the Native Americans in North America, the relationship with geography is really key. And the relationship with the environment as well is a dominant theme that I've often seen come up in APUSH, but it's starting to creep in more with the AP World History exam. Tribes throughout North America varied their way of lives based on the environment. A great example of that is on the Great Plains region, which is sort of like Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado, that kind of region of the United States today. And Great Plains tribes tended to be heavily nomadic. They did not stay in one place very long. And that has to do with the fact that the Great Plains are very open. They're very widespread and vast, flat lands. And that made it very easy for native tribes to be mobile, to move around quite a bit. The Sioux, S-I-O-U-X, are a great example of a mobile Native American group on the Great Plains. And the Sioux, who would run smack into the United States government on many battles throughout the 1800s. In future U.S. history, the Sioux are one of the classic groups that heavily migrated throughout the Great Plains region. So again, good geography allowed for easy, fluid movement throughout the Great Plains region. Let's work our way to the East Coast, and I want to go all the way down into the Southeast, so Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, that Tennessee, that kind of region of the country. And it's in this region that we find incredibly expert farmers who cultivated tremendous amounts of crops, such as corn and tobacco, and ultimately rice would be grown in this region of the America's Southeast. And the native tribes that were in this region were sort of referred to as the 5 civilized tribes. That was a name given to them by Europeans and later Americans, but one of the dominant groups in the 5 civilized tribes were the Cherokee. And the Cherokee tribe was one of the most powerful farming societies in the Native American, North American area. And the Cherokee, along with the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Seminole, and the Creek, those are the 5 civilized tribes. Together, they each had their own cultures, but what they were tremendously successful in doing was cultivating the land. They used a lot of slash and burn techniques, which I mentioned today in class, and they irrigated the land, and they really found a way to make best use of farming techniques, and that would bolster the development of their entire lifestyle. So contrary to the Great Plains, where the native tribes were mobile and on the move constantly, the tribes in the southeast part of the modern-day United States were very sedentary. They were settled down. They didn't rely on hunting, gathering nearly as much as tribes did in other regions. Moving up to the northeast, I want to mention 2 major groups of natives that were unified based on language, kind of like the Bantu in Africa. You've got the Algonquin and the Iroquois. You probably recall their names or have heard them before basis even. The Algonquin and the Iroquois were very much dependent upon their environment. And where they were positioned in the northeast, you're close to the water. So water access, fishing, good farmland was a hallmark of the Northeast. But here's where in the United States history, you really look at the growth of the fur trade. The Algonquin and the Iroquois competed often and usually engaged each other in hostile competition over control of the fur trade. And if we look at the relationship of animals play in throughout world history, something we did a few weeks back, we know how important the fur trade was in Russia, in the development of Russia, with the tigers, the Siberian tigers. And now in the Northeast, it's furs, so elk furs and bear furs and beaver skins. I mean, all sorts of, important furs to these native tribes. So not only were they expert, fishermen and women. Sorry, I don't know what the gender neutral term is. Expert fishers, I guess we'll just call them. But they were also really expert at trapping furs. And as the Europeans would have eventually arrived in the 1600s, they really came seeking access to the fur trade, which the natives had already been doing. But speaking of trade, I want to end sort of North America here on one last high note, and that is the Mississippi River Valley. The Mississippi River is the longest river in the United States today, and it played as prominent a role in the development of Native American tribes in North America as any other geographical feature. The Mississippi River provided tribes in that region outstanding fertile soil. That's a very strong comparison point, a similarity to river valley civilizations that sprouted up all over the world. These Native American tribes that lived near the Mississippi River Valley not only had unbelievable access to good soil, irrigation was a possibility, but trade. And again, this is something that sometimes just gets totally lost in the mix. Historians now know that native tribes in North America had vast, extensive trade networks that linked different parts of the North American region. But where trade flourished the most was unquestionably the Mississippi River Valley. There were great cities, like one of the most important cities I can mention is Cahokia, Cahokia. Cahokia. This is in like modern day Illinois region along the Mississippi River in modern day Illinois. Cahokia was a powerful, large city where thousands of natives lived. And we don't often think of these native tribes as being big city dwellers. But in the Mississippi River Valley, cities sprouted up in relationship to the river. And interestingly, natives built large-scale cities, much like we're used to seeing out of natives in other parts of the world, such as Mesoamerica, like when we talk about the Aztecs later on in the year, large, massive cities. But the Mississippi River Valley was a wonderful trade opportunity for natives that lived in that region. If we can shift gears now and go south to Mesoamerica, I did mention the Aztecs, and I'm sort of abruptly going to end things here on the Mayans. And I'm just going to give you a couple quick hitters. Over in the past, I used to entertain the Mayan theories, and it's exciting and it's very thought-provoking to wonder what happened to this once great Mesoamerican society. But I want to sort of trace the lineage here. In AP World History, the Mayans do appear once in a while on questions, and typically they're sort of sandwiched between the other two important Mesoamerican tribes that we have to be aware of. The Olmecs, which were one of the ancient Mesoamerican tribes, and then, of course, the Aztecs that will come in the 13, 14, 1500s. The Maya were a medieval, so, right around, the 900s, 1000s in that region, a medieval Mesoamerican tribe on the Yucatan Peninsula, which is on the far east coast of Mexico and into some parts of Central America. What I would like you to sort of take away from the Mayans, and while, again, you're welcome to entertain the idea of the mystery behind their disappearance and what happened to their civilization, the Mayans demonstrate a couple key points for us. One, again, are trade networks. There is strong evidence to support the idea that there were large trade networks in Mesoamerica, that even though the Mayans were one of the dominant tribes in the region, the Mayans did trade locally. What the Mayans didn't do, and this is true of the North American tribes as well, they didn't trade overseas. They didn't go on long-distance travel like the Polynesians did. So the Mayans, though, did corner the market and had a large trade network there in Mesoamerica. Another point about the Mayans is technology. While they didn't have metallurgy, the Mayans thrived in other types of technologies, especially farming technology. They were expert farmers, and they invested a lot of their resources in developing farming tools and farming techniques. Again, slash and burn was an important technique used by the Mayans. But really what the Mayans will probably be best known for is their contributions through science. The astronomy, the mathematics that the Mayans had developed to predict the sun and the periods of the sun with the eclipse, and also understanding, to some degree, constellations. And the Mayans really were well ahead of most parts of the world in this area. And it really ties back to one of the important aspects of their culture, which is, the veneration, the love of nature, and the respect for nature. The Mayans, by as far as the religions were concerned, were polytheistic peoples that believed heavily in the spirits of nature, sort of almost similar to animism and Shintoism in that regard. And so this sort of love relationship with nature produced many important gods in Mayan cultures that they worshipped, and the relationship between those animals or those aspects of nature became crucial to the sort of development of Mayan culture. Eventually, of course, the Mayans will die out, and again, it does remain a true history mystery, but they will be the precursor to the great Aztec civilizations and some other Mesoamerican tribes that will emerge and will have direct contact with Europeans. Keep in mind, the Mayans did not have any contact with Europeans. So, in a very quick recap with the Mayans, remember them for their technology, their farming, their ties to Mesoamerica, their astronomy and mathematics, and also their heavily polytheistic religion. I've got about 15 seconds to wrap this so I can get it under 15 minutes. This is quick hitting, but remember for that quiz, take good notes and you'll be fine. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your Wednesdays. Go Diamondbacks, and remember, the past always shapes the future. Take care, Whappers.